There is a quiet moment in everyone's life where something breaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. It's the moment you realize you've been tolerating what you should have walked away from. Most people think strength is about endurance, about staying, about forgiving everything. But real strength, true leadership of your own life starts when you understand this truth. Not all disrespect deserves forgiveness. Some disrespect is not a mistake, it's a message. And if you don't learn how to read that message, you will keep giving access to people who slowly drain your confidence, your clarity, and your self-respect. Today is not about anger. It's not about revenge. It's about standards. And by the end of the speech, you won't just recognize disrespect. You'll understand why refusing to forgive certain behaviors is not cruelty. It's self-respect. Stay with me, because one of these 7 types may already be shaping your life more than you realize. When someone ignores what matters most to you, they're not simply expressing a different opinion. That's the easy explanation we like to give because it feels polite, mature, and peaceful. But the truth is deeper and more uncomfortable. When someone repeatedly dismisses your values, they are telling you, quietly but clearly, that your inner compass doesn't matter to them. And when a person shows you that your compass doesn't matter, they are also showing you how they will treat your time, your trust, and eventually your sense of self. Values are not preferences. They are not negotiable moods or temporary ideas that change with convenience. Values are the invisible framework that holds your decisions together. They are the reason you say yes to some things and no to others. They guide how you treat people when no one is watching and how you act when the pressure is on. When values are respected, trust grows naturally. When they are dismissed, trust erodes, even if everything on the surface looks fine. The danger is that disrespect for your values rarely arrives as open hostility. It often comes wrapped in humor, sarcasm, or honest opinions. It sounds like jokes that make you uncomfortable, but you laugh along with. It sounds like comments that belittle what you care about, followed by "you're too sensitive." It sounds like pressure to compromise just this once, even though that once keeps happening again and again. Over time, the message becomes clear: your principles are inconvenient. When someone mocks what you stand for, they are not attacking the idea itself. They are testing you. They are watching to see whether you will defend your standards or abandon them for acceptance. And every time you stay silent, every time you explain yourself instead of standing firm, you teach them how far they can go. This is how disrespect grows, not suddenly, but slowly, patiently, through small moments you choose to overlook. There is a subtle but important difference between disagreement and dismissal. Disagreement says, "I see your values, I just don't share them." Dismissal says, "Your values are irrelevant." One leaves room for mutual respect. The other creates imbalance. In that imbalance, one person benefits from the relationship while the other slowly loses themselves inside it. This is why forgiving this kind of disrespect is so dangerous. Forgiveness without change doesn't heal the relationship, it reshapes you. It teaches you to shrink, to explain, to justify why your values deserve space. And the more you do that, the more disconnected you become from who you actually are. You begin to second-guess your instincts. You start editing your thoughts before you speak. You hesitate to act on your beliefs because you've been trained to see them as overreactions rather than foundations. Over time, the cost becomes your identity. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You stop recognizing yourself in the choices you make. You feel tired, resentful, and confused, but you can't quite explain why. That's because values are like roots. When they're strong and protected, you grow upward with confidence. When they're damaged or ignored, everything above the surface becomes unstable. People who dismiss your values often still want access to you. They want your loyalty, your support, your energy, your kindness. They want the benefits of being close to you without the responsibility of respecting who you are. And that is not connection, it's convenience. Real connection requires effort. It requires curiosity. It requires the humility to accept that someone else's principles deserve space, even when they challenge your own. There is a reason this kind of disrespect feels so personal. It is personal. Values are not something you pick randomly. They are shaped by your experiences, your struggles, your lessons, and your growth. To dismiss them is to dismiss the journey that formed you. And no amount of surface-level harmony can compensate for that kind of invalidation. Strong people are not those who argue louder or prove themselves constantly. Strong people know when something crosses an invisible line. They understand that not every relationship deserves unlimited access. They understand that respect is not demanded, it is required. And when it is consistently missing, the answer is not to forgive harder, but to stand firmer. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or closed-minded. It means becoming clear about what you will tolerate and what you will not. Clear about the difference between flexibility and self-betrayal. Clear about the truth that peace built on silence is not peace at all, it's avoidance. When you protect your values, you protect your future. Because every decision you make flows from what you believe matters. If someone cannot respect that, they are not aligned with where you are going. And alignment matters more than approval. Approval fades. Alignment sustains. Disrespect that dismisses your values doesn't disappear with time. It grows because it is rewarded with access. The moment you stop rewarding it, everything changes. Some people adjust. Some people leave. Both outcomes give you clarity, and clarity is always worth the discomfort it takes to achieve it. Your values are not obstacles to relationships. They are filters. They reveal who can walk with you and who is only meant to walk past you. Protecting them is not arrogance, it is responsibility. Responsibility to the person you are now and to the person you are becoming. Private mistakes deserve private conversations. That principle is not about politeness or etiquette. It's about respect. When someone truly cares about you, they protect your dignity, especially when you are vulnerable. They understand that correction does not require an audience, and that growth does not need humiliation. So when a mistake you made is turned into a public spectacle, it stops being about honesty and starts being about control. Public humiliation is never accidental. People like to disguise it as humor, honesty, or just being real, but none of those excuses hold up under scrutiny. If the goal were improvement, the conversation would happen privately. If the goal were understanding, it would happen with care. But when someone chooses to embarrass you in front of others, they are making a deliberate decision about where they stand and where they want you to stand beneath them. Humiliation works because it steals something subtle but powerful: your sense of safety. The moment you are mocked, exposed, or shamed in public, you become hyper-aware. You start measuring your words, adjusting your behavior, anticipating the next jab. That is not accountability. That is fear. And fear is a tool used by people who want power without responsibility. The most dangerous part of public humiliation is that it often looks small. A joke that gets a laugh at your expense. A sarcastic comment that reveals something personal. A story shared that wasn't theirs to tell. Each moment feels minor on its own, easy to brush off, easy to forgive. But together they form a pattern. And patterns tell the truth long before words do. When someone humiliates you publicly, they are sending a message not just to you, but to everyone watching. They are positioning themselves as superior and you as the object. This shift in status is intentional. It's how power dynamics are established and reinforced. And once that dynamic is set, it rarely corrects itself, it deepens. Forgiving this behavior without boundaries teaches people that your dignity is flexible. It teaches them that your embarrassment is an acceptable price for their amusement or authority. Over time, you may notice that the jokes get sharper, the comments more personal, the exposure more careless. Not because they forgot your worth, but because you taught them it could be overlooked. There is a difference between being teased by someone who loves you and being humiliated by someone who wants control. Love protects. Control exposes. Love corrects privately. Control performs publicly. The difference is not subtle when you're willing to see it. One leaves you feeling supported, even when challenged. The other leaves you feeling small, even when you've done nothing wrong. People who rely on public humiliation often justify themselves by claiming transparency. But transparency without empathy is cruelty. Truth without respect is not leadership, it's domination. Real strength does not need an audience. Real confidence does not need to diminish others to feel secure. Public humiliation also trains you to betray yourself. You begin to tolerate behavior that violates your sense of self just to keep the peace. You smile when you want to speak up. You laugh when you want to leave. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, even though something inside you keeps tightening. That inner conflict is the cost of forgiveness without accountability. What makes this kind of disrespect especially harmful is that it rewrites the rules of the relationship. Once someone humiliates you publicly and faces no consequences, the unspoken agreement changes. Respect is no longer the baseline. Entertainment, dominance, or control becomes the currency. And in that environment, your growth, confidence, and authenticity begin to shrink. Strong people understand that dignity is not something you earn after the fact. It is something you protect in the moment. They recognize that silence in the face of humiliation is not maturity, it's self-erasure. Addressing it does not require aggression or drama. It requires clarity, a refusal to accept behavior that strips away self-respect. Humiliation thrives where boundaries are weak. The moment you reinforce your boundary, the dynamic shifts. Some people will apologize and adjust. Others will resist, mock, or minimize. That response tells you everything you need to know, because people who value you do not need humiliation to feel important. It's important to remember that allowing public humiliation does not make you humble. It makes you available to be used as an example, a punchline, or a warning to others. And no relationship that requires your dignity as payment is worth maintaining. Public humiliation is strategic because it creates compliance. It keeps you guessing, it keeps you small. And forgiving it without change ensures it will happen again, often in subtler, more damaging ways. Respect does not grow in environments where shame is normalized. Your dignity is not negotiable. It is not something to be traded for belonging, laughter, or approval. When someone chooses to humiliate you publicly, they reveal their priorities. Believing them the first time is not bitterness, it is wisdom. The first time something happens, it's reasonable to assume ignorance. People come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different levels of awareness. Not everyone knows where your limits are or how their words and actions land on you. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt the first time is not weakness, it's generosity. It shows maturity and a willingness to build understanding. But generosity is not meant to be endless when it is not respected. The second time is different. The second time is information. It tells you what the first time could not. Because once you have clearly communicated how something affects you, once you've taken the risk to speak honestly and directly, what happens next reveals intent. If the behavior continues, it is no longer about misunderstanding. It becomes a decision. Speaking up is not easy. It requires vulnerability, clarity, and courage. You expose what hurts you, trusting that the other person will handle that truth with care. When that trust is ignored, when the same behavior repeats, the message becomes clear: your feelings were heard, but they were not prioritized, and that distinction matters more than most people are willing to admit. There is a common mistake people make in these moments. They assume repetition means they did not explain themselves well enough, so they explain again and again. They soften their words, add disclaimers, reduce their needs, hoping clarity will eventually produce respect. But clarity is rarely the issue. Willingness is. When someone wants to respect you, one conversation is usually enough. Forgiveness without change feels noble, but it carries a hidden cost. It turns patience into permission. Each time the behavior repeats and you stay, you reinforce the idea that consequences are optional. Over time, the person learns that your boundaries are flexible, that your discomfort is tolerable, and that your words do not require action. That lesson does not benefit either of you, but it harms you first. What makes repeated disrespect especially damaging is the erosion of trust. Not just trust in the other person, but trust in yourself. You start questioning your judgment. You wonder if you're overreacting, if you're asking for too much, if you should just let it go. But the discomfort doesn't go away, it compounds. Because deep down, you know you already did what was required of you. You communicated, you were honest, you were clear. Strong leadership, whether in a team, a family, or a personal relationship, does not come from endless tolerance. It comes from consistency. Leaders understand that boundaries are only real when they are enforced, not harshly, not emotionally, but firmly. Because without consistency, standards lose their meaning. There is a difference between patience and self-betrayal, and the line between them is crossed quietly. It happens when you begin to accept behavior you would never encourage in someone you care about. It happens when you normalize your own discomfort for the sake of harmony. It happens when you stay silent not because you've found peace, but because you've lost energy. Repeated disrespect after you've spoken up creates an imbalance of responsibility. You are doing the work of communication, reflection, and compromise. The other person is doing the work of convenience. Over time, this imbalance becomes exhausting, and exhaustion is often mistaken for acceptance. People who respect you do not need reminders of your worth. They may make mistakes, but they adjust. They may stumble, but they try. Repetition without effort is not a flaw, it's a signal. It tells you where you stand in their list of priorities. There is also a quiet form of disrespect that appears when someone acknowledges your boundary verbally but ignores it behaviorally. They say the right words, they apologize, they promise to change. But nothing actually changes. This creates confusion and hope at the same time, which is far more damaging than outright dismissal, because hope keeps you waiting and waiting keeps you stuck. Leadership is not about controlling others, it's about modeling self-respect. When you choose not to tolerate repeated disrespect, you are not being unforgiving, you are being aligned. Aligned with the standards you expect in your life. Aligned with the values you claim to live by. Aligned with the future version of yourself who will benefit from the choices you make today. Walking away, pulling back, or enforcing a boundary after repeated disrespect is not an overreaction. It is a response to information you were given more than once. Ignoring that information does not make you compassionate, it makes you unavailable to yourself. Patience is powerful when it is paired with progress. Without progress, patience becomes stagnation. And stagnation quietly erodes confidence, clarity, and peace. You begin to feel smaller not because you lack strength, but because you are using your strength to endure what you should be changing. When someone continues to cross a line you clearly marked, they are showing you how they see the relationship. Believing them is not bitterness, it is wisdom. Protecting yourself in that moment is not punishment, it is leadership. Kindness is not weakness, even though the world often treats it that way. Kindness is one of the strongest forces a person can carry because it requires awareness, restraint, and choice. It means you are capable of power, yet you choose compassion. But kindness without boundaries becomes an open door, and open doors attract more than just those who mean well. They also attract those who are looking for something to take. There are people who recognize kindness not as a value, but as an opportunity. They see generosity and assume availability. They see empathy and assume obligation. They learn very quickly that you will listen, that you will help, that you will give the benefit of the doubt. And slowly, almost invisibly, the relationship begins to shift. What once felt mutual starts to feel one-sided. What once felt supportive begins to feel draining. Exploitation rarely announces itself. It does not start with demands, it starts with needs. Small ones, reasonable ones, the kind you feel good helping with, and because you are kind, you help. Because you care, you show up. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. They appear when something is required, not when something is shared. They reach out when they are empty, not when you are struggling. Your presence becomes a resource, not a relationship. When generosity becomes expected, something sacred is lost. The beauty of giving lies in choice. The moment your kindness is assumed rather than appreciated, the dynamic changes. You are no longer offering, you are supplying. And suppliers are valued only for what they provide, not for who they are. Empathy, when exploited, becomes an excuse. Excuses for poor behavior. Excuses for inconsistency. Excuses for disrespect. You hear explanations instead of accountability. Stories instead of change. And because you understand people, because you see the reasons behind their actions, you stay. You tell yourself they're going through something. You tell yourself patience is love, but love that only flows one way is not love, it is depletion. This kind of disrespect is particularly dangerous because it disguises itself as connection. It feels wrong to call it out because nothing looks overtly abusive. There are no raised voices, no obvious insults, just a slow, steady taking of your time, of your energy, of your emotional labor. And the more you give, the more normal it becomes for them to take. Forgiving this behavior without boundaries sends a powerful message. It says, you can continue as you are and I will adjust. It teaches people that access to you does not require responsibility, that your needs are secondary, that your limits are negotiable. And once someone learns that lesson, they rarely unlearn it on their own. Kind people often struggle here because they confuse compassion with obligation. They believe saying no makes them selfish. They believe pulling back means they've failed morally. But kindness is not measured by how much you sacrifice. It is measured by how intentionally you give. Giving that costs you your well-being is not generosity. It is self-neglect. Over time, exploitation erodes something vital inside you. You begin to feel resentful, even though you were the one who kept saying yes. You feel tired, even though you care deeply. You feel invisible, even though you are constantly present. This internal conflict is a signal, not a flaw. It is your values asking to be protected. True connection is reciprocal, not transactional. It does not keep score, but it does keep balance. There is giving and receiving support and consideration, presence and appreciation. When that balance disappears, kindness turns into currency, and you become the one paying the price. People who exploit kindness often react strongly when boundaries appear. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming cold, of no longer being the person you used to be. But what they are really reacting to is the loss of unlimited access. And that reaction confirms what was happening all along. Kindness should never require you to abandon yourself. It should never demand silence when you are depleted. It should never cost you your peace. When it does, something is wrong, not with your kindness, but with how it is being used. Forgiving exploitation keeps you in a cycle of giving and hoping they will notice, hoping they will reciprocate, hoping they will change. But hope without boundaries is not faith. It is avoidance, and avoidance only delays the moment when you finally have to choose yourself. You do not need to become less kind to protect yourself. You need to become more clear about what you give, clear about when you give, clear about who has earned that access. Because kindness is a gift, not an obligation, and gifts lose their meaning when they are taken without gratitude. Disrespect that exploits your kindness does not stop on its own. It escalates. It continues until there is nothing left to take. And by the time you realize how empty you feel, you may not recognize the person you've become. Protecting your kindness is not selfish. It is how you ensure it still exists tomorrow. Watch closely how people react when you evolve, because growth has a way of revealing truths that comfort never does. When you begin to change, when your standards rise, your habits sharpen, and your vision expands, you create a mirror. And not everyone likes what that mirror reflects. Some people will celebrate you, others will feel unsettled. That reaction tells you far more than their words ever could. Disrespect that undermines your growth rarely appears as open opposition. It's usually subtle, quiet, and disguised as concern or humor. It sounds like doubt framed as realism. It looks like jokes that question your discipline. It feels like a sudden shift in energy when you talk about your goals. What's happening beneath the surface is not about you changing too much. It's about your growth reminding them of the change they postponed. When someone doubts your ambition, they are often protecting their own comfort. Ambition challenges the idea that things must stay the way they are. It disrupts routines, identities, and unspoken agreements. Your decision to want more forces others to confront why they stopped wanting. And for some, that confrontation feels like judgment, even when none was intended. Mockery is another common response. Discipline is easy to laugh at when you're not practicing it. Early mornings, consistent effort, saying no to distractions, these things can make others uncomfortable because they expose the gap between intention and action. Mocking your discipline is a way to shrink that gap without actually doing the work. It's easier to belittle effort than to commit to it. Resentment often follows improvement. As you grow, you change the dynamics of your relationships. You may no longer participate in the same conversations, habits, or excuses. You may start valuing your time differently. To someone who benefited from the old version of you, this can feel like loss. And instead of addressing that feeling honestly, they express it through resistance. This kind of disrespect is dangerous because it attacks your momentum. It plants seeds of doubt at the very moment you need confidence. It encourages you to slow down, to stay small, to return to what's familiar. And because it often comes from people close to you, it carries emotional weight. You begin to wonder if you're being selfish, unrealistic, or disloyal by changing. But growth is not betrayal. It is responsibility. Responsibility to your potential. Responsibility to the future you're building. Responsibility to the life you claim you want. Anyone who truly cares about you may feel surprised by your evolution, but they will not try to sabotage it. People who undermine your growth often do so unconsciously. They don't wake up intending to hold you back. They simply react from their own unresolved discomfort. But unconscious harm is still harm, and excusing it does not make it less impactful. Forgiving this kind of disrespect keeps you tethered to versions of yourself you've already outgrown. It keeps you negotiating your progress to preserve someone else's comfort. Over time, this negotiation becomes exhausting. You start dimming your enthusiasm, you downplay your achievements, you hesitate to share your goals, not because they're wrong, but because they're inconvenient. There is a quiet courage required to keep growing in an environment that resists you. It means choosing alignment over approval. It means trusting your direction even when it's not validated. It means understanding that not everyone who started the journey with you is meant to continue it. Outgrowing people is not an act of arrogance. It is a natural outcome of change. Growth rearranges relationships. It shifts priorities. It reveals who is connected to your purpose and who is attached to your familiarity. And that clarity, while uncomfortable, is necessary. When someone resents your improvement, they are responding to a loss of control. Your growth reduces their influence. It challenges the role they played in your life. Instead of adjusting, they resist. That resistance shows up as discouragement, sarcasm, or passive opposition. And the more you excuse it, the more space it takes. Strong individuals understand that support does not always sound like praise, but it never sounds like sabotage. Support allows room for evolution. Sabotage asks you to stay the same. Learning to tell the difference is a critical part of maturity. Your growth will make some people uncomfortable. That is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is often a sign you are doing something necessary. The goal is not to be liked by everyone, but to be aligned with who you are becoming. Disrespect that undermines your growth does not deserve forgiveness, because forgiveness implies return. It implies continuation. But some dynamics are not meant to be repaired. They are meant to be surpassed. You don't need to argue with resistance. You don't need to convince anyone of your vision. You simply need to keep moving. Growth requires space. Space to act differently. Space to become someone new. Anyone who tries to shrink that space is not invested in your future. And no matter how familiar they are, that kind of resistance should not be carried with you. It should be outgrown. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are instructions that teach others how to treat you. They clarify what is acceptable, what is respectful, and what is not. Healthy boundaries make relationships safer, not colder. They create structure, predictability, and trust. So when someone crosses a boundary you clearly set, it is not confusion. It is a response to information they were given. The first time a boundary is crossed, it may be testing. The second time, it is learning. When it continues, it becomes a statement. A statement that says, I hear you, but your limits are optional to me. That message is not subtle, and it is not accidental. It reveals a mindset where your comfort ranks below their desires. People often confuse boundary violations with closeness. They believe that being close means having unlimited access. They interpret limits as rejection. But real closeness respects consent. It honors autonomy. Control, on the other hand, ignores both. When someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, they are not seeking connection. They are asserting dominance over your space, your time, or your emotional world. Boundary violations often begin small. A comment you asked them not to make. A topic you asked them to avoid. A behavior you clearly said you were not comfortable with. Each time it happens again, you are faced with a choice. Address it and risk discomfort, or ignore it and absorb the cost. Many people choose the second option because it feels easier in the moment. But ease now creates difficulty later. Forgiving boundary violations without change teaches people that your limits are flexible. It trains them to push a little further each time. What was once an exception becomes a pattern. What was once uncomfortable becomes normal. And slowly, your boundaries stop functioning at all. This is how people lose their sense of self without realizing it. They begin to live in reaction mode, adjusting to others instead of acting from their own values. They feel invaded but struggle to explain why. They feel resentful but blame themselves for being too sensitive. The truth is not sensitivity. It is a boundary that has been ignored too many times. Clear boundaries require clarity, not justification. You do not owe long explanations for what you need to feel safe or respected. When someone demands justification, they are often searching for a way around the boundary, not a way to understand it. Respect listens, control negotiates. People who respect you may not always like your boundaries, but they will honor them. People who do not respect you will test, minimize, or mock them. They may accuse you of being difficult, distant, or changed. These reactions are not about your boundaries being unreasonable. They are about access being restricted. Repeated boundary crossing is not a misunderstanding of communication. It is a disregard for consent. And consent is not something that improves with time if it is not enforced. It erodes. Each violation makes the next one easier. Boundaries protect more than your time and space. They protect your energy, your focus, and your emotional health. When those protections fail, everything else is affected. Your patience shortens, your confidence wavers, your peace disappears. Not because you are weak, but because you are constantly defending ground that should already be respected. Forgiveness without boundaries is not compassion, it is surrender. It tells others that your discomfort is manageable, that your limits are suggestions, not standards. And once someone internalizes that belief, they rarely stop on their own. There is also a quiet danger in flexible limits. They teach you to doubt yourself. You begin to ask whether your needs are reasonable. You start adjusting your expectations downward. You normalize being uncomfortable, and that normalization becomes your baseline. Strong people understand that boundaries do not damage relationships. They reveal them. They show you who is capable of respect and who is invested in control. When someone reacts negatively to a boundary, they are revealing their priorities. Believing that information is an act of self-respect. Control thrives where boundaries are weak. Respect thrives where boundaries are clear. You cannot have both in the same space. One will always overpower the other. When you allow repeated boundary violations, you send a message not only to others, but to yourself. You teach yourself that your comfort is secondary, that your needs are negotiable, that peace must be earned through endurance. That lesson is costly. Boundaries are not punishments, they are agreements. And agreements only work when both sides honor them. When someone refuses to do so, the responsibility shifts, not to convince them, but to protect yourself. Flexible limits eventually disappear because they are not enforced. And when limits disappear, so does self-respect. Protecting your boundaries is not about pushing people away. It is about preserving the conditions where real connection can exist. Everyone makes mistakes. That truth is universal and unavoidable. No one moves through life without missteps, poor judgment, or moments they wish they could take back. Mistakes themselves are not the measure of character. What matters, what always reveals the truth, is what happens next. Responsible people do not hide from their actions. They face them, they own them, and they change because of them. Disrespect becomes unforgivable when accountability is absent, not because the mistake was unforgivable, but because the refusal to take responsibility breaks something essential. Trust cannot survive without accountability. It requires the confidence that when harm is caused, it will be acknowledged, addressed, and corrected. Without that, forgiveness is no longer an act of grace. It becomes an act of denial. An apology is not just words. It is recognition. It is the willingness to say, I see what I did, and I understand its impact. When there is no apology, the message is not neutrality, it is dismissal. Silence after harm communicates that the pain caused is insignificant or inconvenient. And when someone refuses to apologize, they are often protecting their ego at the expense of your dignity. Ownership goes deeper than apology. Someone can say sorry and still avoid responsibility. Ownership means naming the behavior without excuses. It means not shifting blame, minimizing impact, or rewriting events to appear innocent. When someone refuses ownership, they are not confused. They are defending an image of themselves that cannot include fault. And maintaining that image becomes more important than repairing the relationship. Change is the final and most important component. Without change, apologies are performances. They sound sincere, but they lead nowhere. Change is what turns accountability into trust. It is the evidence that reflection happened and that respect is real. When behavior stays the same, the message is clear. The apology was meant to end the conversation, not transform the behavior. When all three are missing, apology, ownership, and change, disrespect hardens into a pattern. And patterns shape relationships more than intentions ever will. Forgiving a pattern without accountability teaches people that your trust can be reset without effort. That harm has no lasting consequence, that they can continue as they are, and you will adapt. This is where many people confuse forgiveness with healing. Healing requires truth. It requires acknowledgement. Forgiveness without those things asks you to carry unresolved harm alone. It asks you to pretend closure exists where none was created. Over time, this creates internal conflict. You say you've moved on, but your body remembers. Your behavior changes, your guard goes up. Because trust was never repaired, only ignored. People who avoid accountability often frame themselves as victims when confronted. They focus on how uncomfortable the conversation makes them. They highlight their intentions rather than the impact. They accuse you of holding grudges instead of asking what they could do differently. These deflections are not misunderstandings. They are strategies to escape responsibility. Accountability requires humility. It requires the courage to admit imperfection and the willingness to grow. Not everyone has that courage. And when someone repeatedly chooses comfort over accountability, they are choosing themselves over the relationship. Accepting that truth is painful but necessary. Forgiving without accountability also changes how you see yourself. You begin to question whether your standards are too high. You wonder if expecting apology or change is unreasonable. But standards are not demands, they are agreements about what is required for trust to exist. Lowering them does not make you more compassionate. It makes you more vulnerable to repeated harm. Trust is built in small moments of responsibility. In apologies that are specific, in ownership that is honest, in changes that are visible over time. When those moments are absent, trust slowly drains away, and once trust is gone, no amount of time can replace it. Only accountability can. Disrespect without accountability places the burden of resolution entirely on you. You are expected to understand, to forgive, to move on while the other person remains unchanged. That imbalance is not sustainable. It turns relationships into emotional labor where one person does the work and the other collects the benefits. Self-deception begins when you tell yourself that forgiving without accountability is strength. Strength is not enduring unresolved harm. Strength is refusing to participate in a dynamic where your pain is invisible. True forgiveness happens after accountability, not instead of it. When someone shows no willingness to apologize, no ability to own their actions, and no intention to change, they are telling you who they are in that moment. Believing them is not bitterness, it is clarity. Protecting yourself from that pattern is not punishment, it is self-respect. Here's the truth most people never hear. Forgiveness is powerful, but only when paired with boundaries. You are not required to forgive behavior that requires you to abandon yourself. Strength is not staying where you are disrespected. Strength is choosing standards over comfort. And when you do, you don't lose people, you lose misalignment, and what replaces it is clarity, is confidence, is peace. That is leadership. That is self-respect. That is the beginning of a better life.